So they assigned me to my unit, and I went to my first unit, and it was interesting. Now it was at, like I said, it was at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and after a month or so though I figured out that I wanted to go airborne, jump out of airplanes, which I eventually did later on in life. But they had this one sergeant. He was just a goofball, man, and he was an old country dude. I mean, an old country drunk dude, man. And he was always like cussing people out. He always get in my face, no, get back in his. And finally he figured out he was just going to leave me alone because I wasn't one to mess with. You know, I'm sitting there thinking about the stories at Fort Bragg, and I don't know that there's a whole lot of stories to tell. This might be a couple weekends only. Now, we had this one platoon sergeant, my platoon. Well, that platoon sergeant left. He was actually a platoon sergeant, the guy I'm talking about, the old drunk country dude. And then this other sergeant came in and took over as platoon sergeant. And he was really cool. He had a real gravelly voice. And he was from there, North Carolina, you know, and he was an old black guy, but he had a voice like a preacher. He did. When he would talk, automatically he would make you think of a preacher. You know, he'd be like, "Oh, I'll tell you, you soldiers, you just gotta, you know, just gotta take things day by day, and you know, it just comes and it goes." And he was really cool though. I liked him a lot better. His assistant, who sometimes could be acting platoon sergeant. So, in other words, when the platoon sergeant was away, the guy who would act on his behalf, he was really kind of a funny dude. He was really cool, but he wasn't all there, man. He was like, it was like, and when something would go down, he would freak out. Like the first sergeant would come down and go, "Hey, I want some maintenance done on some of these trucks here," and then just turn him mode pool. He'd freak out. "First sergeant wants maintenance, man. What are we gonna do? What? Okay, oh Jesus, oh Lord." Be like, "Sarge, it's okay, man. It's okay." You know, one day the first sergeant came down and he goes, "Hey, who does that wrench belong to over there by the tire?" He freaked out, man. He's like, "First sergeant said there was a wrench on the ground. Whose wrench is it? Whose wrench is that?" The first sergeant said there's a wrench on the ground. Like, "Sarge, pick it up and say, whose is this?" He was freaking out because the first sergeant asked. All the first sergeant said was, "Whose wrench is that?" There you go. He was just weird, man. He used to freak. We called him Sergeant Cardiac Arrest. And he'd come back and go, "There's Sergeant Cardiac Arrest." He was a trip. He'd be like bouncing off and freaking, man. And one day, a couple of the sergeants went to a meeting, and he was in charge, and he was like, he walked over me, and I was just a specialist. Now, some of the people who's been in the Army kind of know where I'm going. When I say this, you're going to understand a little bit. I was a Spec 4 specialist. He was a staff sergeant, E6. And he was acting platoon sergeant that day, and he walks up to me and goes, "You're in charge, specialist." I go, "What?" "You're the platoon sergeant today." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" I gotta go, man. And he just takes off. I don't know where he went. He was gone for the rest of the day. I held formations while I stood in front of the platoon for formations and everything for the rest of the day. But one of my old sergeants from Germany called, Sergeant Boxton. I don't think I ever talked about him. He was a funny guy. One story I did miss in Germany is the night all the sergeants were getting drunk up in the motor pool bay while the soldiers worked, and I busted them out on that the next day. Because they were supposed to show up for getting some trucks ready to go to the field, and they didn't, and the colonel came, and I busted them out. But Sergeant Boxton, that sergeant, he called me at Fort Bragg, or he called looking for me, and they said, "Hey, Sarge, you got a," and they call me Sarge. Everybody call everybody Sarge. I don't know why, but "Hey, Sarge, you got a phone call in the motor pool." I'm like, "What?" "Yeah." So I went in there, and it was Sergeant Boxton, and "Hey, what's up, man? Sergeant Boxton." That's how he used to talk. He was an old black guy from South Carolina. And I was like, "Hey, Sarge." "Sergeant Boxton." "Hey, I'm at Fort Bragg, man. I just got here. I called. They said you was in this unit, and I called to see you was there, man." Like, "Yeah, what's up, man?" We talked a little bit. I go, "Yeah, well, I'm the platoon sergeant today." He goes, "What? You're an E4, right?" I go, "Yeah, I'm a specialist." "And you're platoon sergeant?" I go, yeah. He goes, that's the unit I want to be in. I'll be first sergeant. I'll be sergeant major there. You know, it was funny. It was pretty funny, but I was like, hey, man. I go, they all took off on me, man, and they did. And it was like I was the highest ranking Spec 4, highest ranking guy in the platoon that day. The whole formations. They're gone, man. All the NCOs just took off. I was like, whatever. I earned my corporal stripes. They gave me 2 stripes. So I got my corporal. And you remember the movie Porky's, right? Porky's? Where they had the pig in the bar. They actually had one of those in Fayetteville, North Carolina, Porky's. They did. They had a country bar. It was called Porky's. Anybody could go in there. They had kids go in there too. People would bring their kids in there and they would socialize. And the way the kids didn't get served was if you were under 21, they'd put this big red pig stamp on your hand. If you were over 21, they'd give you a black pig stamp. And if you had a black stamp, you could get an alcoholic drink. If you had a red stamp, that meant that you were under 21, you couldn't be served. In Fayetteville, they called it Vietnam because everybody fought. You didn't go down to the Murchison, which was the Murchison Boulevard. That's where all the stuff happened. Bragg Boulevard was where Porky's was. And they had this one club on Fort Bragg called the Stab and Jab. That's right, the Stab and Jab, because there was fights in there every weekend. And the 82nd Airborne Military Police did not play. They were usually the ones who responded, was the 82nd Airborne MPs. Because the 82nd would go in there and tell people just to stop, sit down, go over there, go. And if you walked up to tell them something, you got hit. That's all the stories I can think of right now, time-wise. I do have a couple more stories from Fort Bragg. Fort Bragg was pretty uneventful, but I don't want to get to that just yet because of time. I don't want you to have to sit here for 30 minutes and listen to me ramble. Next week, I'm going to tell you why I didn't go airborne. I wanted to go airborne. That's right, knees in the breeze. I wanted to be more than a 5-jump chump, and I'll tell you what a 5-jump chump is next week. But I wanted to be more than all that. But I'll tell you what, I didn't get the chance to go airborne. I'll tell you why next week.